So at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Ashok Sharma for doing this wonderful course with excellent presentations. All the faculty have given such great talks. And I'm going to be talking to you about therapeutic keratoplasty in corneal perforations. The aim of therapeutic keratoplasty is surgical debridement of the infected tissue, elimination of the microbial load, maintenance of the globe integrity, diagnosis of the infective pathology, and provide visual rehabilitation. And of course, the indications are that it could be corneal perforation or impending perforation or treatment which is refractory to ulcers. And more importantly, basically, you want to prevent involvement of the adjacent sclera as well as decrease the risk of endophthalmitis. So I think it should be always done sooner rather than later. Now, this is just looking at our data, and although you would expect, or everybody would expect, that fungal cases would require more of therapeutic grafts, but because ours is a tertiary care center, we get all kinds of cases. So, if you see, combined fungal and bacterial were responsible for half of our cases, and at least a third of the cases did not have any microbiological diagnosis. It is important to take a good history, to do a general medical evaluation, because you might have to take these patients under general anesthesia. Then the ocular examination, which includes the slit lamp evaluation, the especially more how far the infection is from the limbus, intraocular pressure measurement, and then you have to do an investigation because you want to know that whether the posterior segment is fine or not. Antimicrobial therapy preoperatively will be continuing. So topical and systemic therapy directed towards the offending microbe, especially if the microbiological report is there. Then topical antibiotic therapy to prevent bacterial superinfection mainly, and antimicrobial therapy, especially the oral antimicrobials, if there is a limbal involvement, intraocular spread, impending perforation or perforated corneal ulcer. And I think you would do it earlier for fungal keratitis, even if the ulcers are deeper or if the ulcers are larger in size. Important is anesthesia. So local anesthesia is generally given as shown with hyaluronidase because that gives a better effect. Then subtenons also can be done with lignocaine and bupivacaine. And of course, large perforations may require general anesthesia. Now, generally, we like to use optical grade tissue, but that may not be possible at all times because of the paucity of good quality donor tissue. So the criteria, especially in our country, is not as stringent as that for optical keratoplasty. And any B grade tissue can be used. And even in some cases, we've used glycerine preserved cornea, especially in the COVID times, when we do not have any type of cornea which is available to us. So I'll take you through the various surgical steps which are shown here. So exposure is very important. You can use a self-retaining speculum, avoid external pressure. You can use a Flaringa ring to provide scleral support, and then peritomy may be required, especially if the exudation area of exudation is large and there's involvement of the limbus. And because there'll be a bleeding which will be there, so wet field cautery should be done for all cases. Now then you may need to do a recipient bed trephination and sizing of the trephination. That is important for all our therapeutic grafts. We tend to oversize by 0.75 to 1 millimeter larger because it helps in formation of a better anterior chamber. And then side port entry is done after measuring the size of the involved area. And subsequently, the trephination can be done. It is done in a guarded manner because you don't want to abruptly to enter into the anterior chamber. And lamellar separation of the corneal layers is preferred instead of a en bloc removal of the host to preserve as much of the iris as possible. Then apart from this, when you are entering inside, there should be hardly any pressure because you don't want the extrusion of the intraocular contents. And if the entire cornea is involved, sometimes freehand dissection may be required. And all the necrotic tissue and the infected tissue should be excised. Then anterior chamber reconstruction is again important, and what one needs to do is all exudates should be removed, all membrane should be removed. Viscoelastic injection should be done, especially in the angles at 360 degrees because you want the angles to be open. You may have to do large peripheral iridectomies because you don't want a secondary angle closure in the post-op period. And intracameral antibiotics or antifungals are given as appropriate depending on what the organism is. So this is just to show how anterior chamber entry is going to be done. You can do peritomy to see where is the extent of the lesion, cauterization of the bleeders is done, AC is entered, little bit of viscoelastic can then be put there. One has to be careful, you can't put too much, especially if there's a perforation. Encompass 1 millimeter more than the area of the largest exudate that is there, and do a layer by layer separation or lamellar corneal debulking, which is done in a guarded manner because you want to preserve as much of the limbus as possible, and also because you don't want a sudden decrease in the pressure in the anterior chamber. And this is the overlying layers of the corneas are then excised. Now, this is another case, a reinfection after regraft. Again, in this case, the peritomy is being done, the AC is entered, and it's a very bloody surgery, and there is a lot of bleeding here. So again, the dictum is same. You want to preserve as much of the iris tissue as possible, and so these layers are removed, and sweeping of the angle can be done with the help of a cannula or with the help of the viscoelastic, because you want the angle to be open. Not that this is a permanent solution, but it does help to form the anterior chamber and subsequent placement of the graft. A lens consideration, removal of the lens should be deferred because it is an effective barrier to prevent spread of infection. And lens removal in cases can be done if there is concomitant endophthalmitis, and always it is good to constrict the pupil so that you prevent the spontaneous expulsion of the lens. Then open sky vitrectomy can be done for aphakic patients and whenever there's inadvertent crystalline lens extrusion. And also, if there is concomitant endophthalmitis, then intravitreal antibiotics should also be given, vancomycin and ceftazidime. Now, after excision of the host cornea, it is important to measure the recipient bed, do additional trimming if required, and then use 0.5 or 0.75 or 1 millimeter grafts which are 1 millimeter larger. Now, usually we like to use interrupted sutures in infected cases and at least go to 75% depth, use 10-0 monofilament nylon sutures, and generally full thickness bites are not taken because that will act as a conduit for the passage of infection, and greater number of sutures may be required for larger grafts. And whenever you excise this button, this is to be sent for culture and for smears, bacterial and fungal both. Now, again, this is just to show a case how you would go first, measure the size of the ulceration that is there. Anterior chamber entry is then done. Flaringa ring has already been applied, and this can be sutured with the help of the vicryl. And then eccentric trifoliation is done because the lesion itself is eccentric and you can't take such a big graft. Viscoelastic is then instilled, followed by the ledge, which is removed. The peripheral part of the anterior chamber is formed, and then sutures are given with 10-0 monofilament nylon sutures at 90% depth. It is important that you don't go to a depth of 100%, and then at the end of the surgery, this can be removed. So there can be intraop problems which have been listed here: loose sutures, graft host overriding, expulsive hemorrhage, spontaneous lens extrusion, etc. Now this has been fast forwarded a little bit, but just see it, at times this can happen. The Flaringa ring has not also been put here. So the lens is expulsing out, and so are the intraocular contents. So very quickly, the graft which has been already trifinated earlier is placed, but very difficult in such cases to manage because all the contents are being extruded out. Important thing is to immediately put your thumb there so that nothing comes out, and try and suture the graft as fast as possible. Post-operatively, you have to give antimicrobial therapy, control the inflammation, control the pressures, and allow epithelial healing. And corticosteroids is, of course, a double-edged sword. Now, this is just to say that topical steroids can be given for all cases. Post-operatively, the antimicrobial, systemic, and topical would continue whatever is being continued pre-operatively, except in cases of fungal keratitis, where we like to wait or withhold for 3 weeks and then only give the antifungal, the steroids topically. Otherwise, for viral cases, they can be given, and in acanthamoeba, again, avoid using them, but systemic steroids can be used. This is just to show how PHMB is prepared, and for acanthamoeba, anti-acanthamoeba medications can be given. So there are some problems which can occur, such as loose sutures here, which have to be immediately addressed. And then there can be hemorrhage or hyphema. Then again, that has to be taken care of. You have to wash it. Secondary glaucoma, you have to take care of the pressures. If there's a recurrence, you may have to repeat a graft. And if you look at the outcomes, the anatomical cure rate is 86 to 100%. The functional success rate is 13 to 60%. And there is a recurrence rate which can occur 6 to 7%. And this is a paper on therapeutic keratoplasty for microbial keratitis, which highlights almost everything pretty much in details as I've talked to you. These are outcomes of some of our cases after therapeutic grafts in various types of grafts. And rule of half is to be remembered. That is, if you do therapeutic PK, half will have to undergo regraft, especially if they have been done by B-grade corneas, and half of the grafts survive, and half of the patients would require visual rehabilitation. So collagen cross-linking has been used, and if you cross-link the corneas, in our experience, we found it to be good. There are less chances of recurrence. Even femtosecond people have used it. We've not used it because of fear of infection in that OR. And there are some demographic and socioeconomic barriers which need to be addressed so that the therapeutic grafts are avoided. And I think this is something which we should look at when we are making the policy. Just a video to show how we do a therapeutic DALC by doing a viscoelastic separation of the overlying stromal layers into the edges of the desmotocele, and it comes out very easily. This is the bare Descemet's membrane, and B-grade cornea can then be used for the therapeutic DALC in these cases. So in the COVID times, we need to follow them, and this is the U tool, which was designed by my senior resident, Dr. Rahul Bafna, of how the patients themselves can follow up, especially in cases of children, and how these pictures can be taken on a smartphone and can be sent to the cornea surgeons or to the physicians who are treating them, just to highlight the fact that how monitoring can be done, even if the patients cannot come up to you. So thank you very much for your kind attention.